All right, Anita. It's great to have you on the show. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, delighted. I'm delighted. Do you want to tell us a bit about yourself, how you got to where you are today, and what you're up to?
Sure, absolutely. Glad to share. So let's see who I am. So my name's Anita Lane. I'm a director of operations for a really great company called Hotel Equities, regional director. So have assets kind of all over the United States, but primarily in Virginia, in Georgia, in South Carolina. So how I got here, goodness, long story, but I sort of stumbled into the hotel business through accounting. I was a payroll clerk in a full service hotel, and they hired me because I knew the payroll software, and then became a hotel controller, learned the business from the back end, learned the business from the money end, which was awesome. I had some really great mentors and friends, and grew up in full service, and then fell in love with operations and decided that it was time that I wanted to do it for myself. And answered a blind ad, and apparently I'm a halfway decent salesperson because I talked myself into a GM job and
Yeah.
then had to figure out how to do the work, right? So I was a hotel general manager and then became an above property leader for that company in Tennessee. And then since then have been on a little bit of a journey, have worked for a couple of different companies, learning resorts, learning above property with some really great companies in Tennessee. And now I'm with Hotel Equities. So love what I do for a living, love the part of the business, and enjoy hospitality immensely.
That's awesome. And I mean, you guys have so many locations. Like when I was doing my sort of like pre-work, I was like, I always go out and like, oh, let me see the portfolio. And I'm like, oh, there'll be like 16 here. I couldn't even count how many there was there. It was so many. Like how many hotels are like say for you, like how many like are under your purview right now?
Sure, absolutely. So I have 15 assets right now that I am very proud to get to serve, and I have everything from select service hotels all the way to some really amazing full service assets. I have a big Sheraton in downtown Market in Columbia, and then I have some really great hotels in Augusta. So we're getting geared up for the Masters right now and
Yeah.
getting ready for that big event. Hotels in and around Atlanta, so some amazing Hamptons. So kind of a little bit of everything all over. But yeah, I have 15 in my portfolio right now, and love taking care of those GMs and those owners.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so like taking, I mean, you have so many people to take care of. I was gonna say, like, what's like it's funny because we're like in the middle of February now. So I was gonna say,
Right.
like, you're 2024, like, what are your big goals? But like, what are like, you've so many locations there under your remit alone. Like, what are your sort of like biggest opportunities or challenges that you're facing?
Yeah, so I'm still fairly new to the company, which is interesting. I've been here for gosh, about 18 months, and I think so for me, we're really getting into making sure that the foundational learning is there. I coach GMs for a living and really take care of owners and make sure that that their asset is performing. So I think I learned a lot over the course of the last year, and 2023 was very interesting.
Yep.
But, for us, this year is really going to be about accountability and about making sure that and developing, I'm very particular to say developing accountable leaders, right? Because I think that that's what we do for a living when you do what I do. But yeah, making sure that we're meeting the metrics, making sure that we're really, that we're adjusting and that we're pivoting well. So yeah, it's going to be a good year. I'm excited. We're sort of holding ourselves accountable as a group, and I see
Yeah.
myself very much as the servant leader. So I'm here to serve my GMs, and so far, into February, middle of February already, which is hard to believe. We're
Yeah.
tracking pretty well, even though I think the business itself had to take a little bit of a deep breath in January, because numbers are what they are sometimes in
Yep.
January. But yeah, so this is a year for us that we're really going to try to hold ourselves to the metrics and make sure that we're making great adjustments and that we're getting stronger and faster at the things that we do.
Yeah, totally. It's interesting. I always think about that, like with say, it's cool that like, you're trying to design a program to create and develop like accountable leaders and really putting the emphasis on like the accountable. It sounds to me like you're trying to make your GMs very entrepreneurial or like make them very sort of like comfortable with problem solving, so to speak. Like when you talk about like designing or creating like accountable leaders, what do you mean by that?
So I think one of the best things about being part of Hotel Equities is that we have core values, and so I'll let you look those up at your convenience. But if you think about the relationship between the ownership, who has invested so much into building the asset and really getting it lifted out of ground, and they're trusting us to run it, and then you're exactly right. You think about that entrepreneurial GM. One of our core values says that inspect what you expect. Right. So I think that we want our general managers to see those assets and as theirs and to see themselves as the CEO of the business. That's important. Right. So as the other thing that we sort of are really focusing on this year is if it was your dollar, would you spend it? So you're running somebody else's business, right? So the decisions that you're making, are they sound fiscal decisions? And yet the flip side of that is, are they people decisions? Do you have a heart for people? Because I think that's another piece that's really great about being part of Hotel Equities, is that we're a very people-centric organization. So so it's, it is really that entrepreneurial. We want you to do it in your way with your skill set. If you think about it, with 15 leaders, I have varying degrees of understanding and experience. And so what's really cool is to watch them sort of communicate with each other and start to lift each other up and teach each other. And sometimes that's the magic.
It's interesting because, like, sometimes I hear from, especially in people who work in hotels, and I'll say that, but like, I hear this from everyone across the board, no matter what, which is like, you can teach service to people, but like, what makes a great GM in hospitality? What are the intangibles that you see in great GMs?
Yeah. So, for me personally, I think you can teach the skill set. I tell my GMs, I can teach you the tools in the toolbox, but I can't teach you to get up and love people and love the stickiness of people. And so, I think the intangibles are great work ethic, right? So you have to get up in that business like it's your business. You gotta get in there and roll your sleeves up, and you got to do the things that need to be done. I think people that can take a hard look at themselves, the ability to kind of look in the mirror and say, I'm great at this, but, I really need to work on this. I'm a true believer in playing to your strengths. So one of the coolest things about having this many assets is I have people who say, I like this discipline, but I really do not enjoy that. So you can partner them up with different people in the organization that can help teach them, better ways, shortcuts, things that they can do to make it more manageable. I think servant leadership is true to my heart. You have to find people who really want to wake up in the morning and go serve other people. You have to find people who really say, I want to grow my team. Because if you think about it as a GM, you're the general manager. You're in the middle of the circle, right? So they've got to want to grow people, and they've got to want to better their team and better their circumstances. You have to really like guests. You have to really like guest interaction. So those are the things that I cannot teach. You either have them or you don't. But the rest of it, the tools, the how-tos, those other things, the brand components, I can teach you all of that.
It's interesting because I love, like, servant leadership is like true to heart, and it's interesting because I hear from so many of your peers, that it's like one of those things that's, like, it's hard to describe, but when you see it. Like, I think, I had somebody on, and he owns a bunch of, like, he's a chief operating officer of a group that own, like, lots and lots of restaurants and pubs in Oklahoma. And he was like, I can walk in to the restaurant today and I can just tell you if the place is on fire or not just by looking around. Like, the guests don't realize it yet, but like, I can see it. And he's like, that's the kind of level of sort of like person who gets it, like, deep in their soul. And I guess, like, for you as like a operations leader, and you have like 15 hotels under your purview, you are placing an enormous trust in your GMs to, like, run the individual hotels effectively for you. How do you, like, is there like a process for, like, communicating sort of the core values and mission of the group? Like, what responsibility have you to make sure that gets all the way down to the sort of frontline staff?
Yeah, so I think you have to have a level of commitment. There's a really cool leadership saying in a John Maxwell book that says, "People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care." So for me, if someone comes to work on my team, then they're trusting me with growing them. They're trusting me largely with their career. So I think it starts with me and my relationship with them. I try to make sure that I am there on day one to onboard all my GMs in person. Sometimes there's been a couple of times I've not made it till like 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night, but I can make it there. I also think that it's important that, even in the interview process, I'm trying to ask the questions about how I can be the best leader for them
Yeah.
that I can possibly be. From there, I think it's about, checking in on a regular basis. I will tell you last year, and it's funny because you learn as you go.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like I wanted to overwhelm my general managers with a bunch of extra meetings. So last year we met biweekly, and that worked pretty well. But what I figured out by the end of the year is some of them need to meet on a more regular basis. So this year we opened it up to, we meet weekly, and one of those is mandatory and one of those is not. And what's so funny is most of the folks are still coming to both meetings.
Yeah.
You watch for patterns, you listen. Boy, you have to be an active listener to do what I do for a living. You have to understand what the whys, right? That
Yeah.
really matters. Why do you want to grow to the next level? What are your competencies, or what do you not feel comfortable with? And how do I remove that for you? So, I think it really comes down to trust. I think it comes down to, yes, I'm trusting them with my
Yeah.
career as well, because what I do for a living is answer for other people, right? But they're trusting me. And I think it starts with really acknowledging that and understanding that I'm there to grow them, not to hurt them, not to ever, sometimes hold them accountable, absolutely, but always to champion their cause and
Yeah.
always help them get to the next level. I would feel at my best if I could grow 15 RDOs. Like if those
RDO meaning, just so
regional
like
director of operations,
for
yeah.
listeners of the podcast.
Yes, of course. So regional director of operations. So for next level for me would be like a vice president role.
Yeah.
And jokingly, I told somebody last week, I'd rather be a really good R than a really bad V. So I like where I sit right now. I like the learning opportunity of helping these folks get where they want to go. You're not a leader until you can create a leader who can create a leader, in my mind. So I've got to watch for those opportunities for my GMs and see who they're growing on their benches as well.
No, totally. It's like almost like a sports.
Yeah,
like a sports team, they talk about the trees, like what you're
Right.
kind of like. And I think, great leadership begets great leadership, like when it comes to like, you made a great point there thinking you're kind of like, I'm just fascinated by the point you're making is like, you want them to be the next RDO. And like, as in almost like designing like the pipeline that everybody knows where they stand and like, this is the next progression and this is the next, because at least that gives motivation to the most ambitious that are there as well. Like, as in, so you're giving the opportunity to the ambitious ones. I guess like question I have for you is like, how has the GM changed in your mind since COVID? Like, as in, has that the change? I feel like I hear from. Well, actually, I would leave it to you before I kind of give my 2 cents. Tell me, like, what has happened? What has happened to GM since COVID?
Well, I'll tell you, people are choosing probably the biggest change that I can tell. And I was a GM, prior to COVID. And I'm not that far removed. I remember it very well myself. And a lot of us at my level became a GM again. I was very intentional about during COVID, I took a step back and actually went to run a resort as an AGM and a project manager because I wanted to remember what it was like, but do it better and do it with a level of understanding about myself. For me, probably the biggest change that I'm seeing in GMs is that people are choosing their leaders over their paychecks. People are choosing culture and alignment, and that trust is ever more important. You can work hard for anyone, but you are choosing who you want to work for and with these days. So that really matters. In my role, you better be somebody that people want to work for and with. I think GMs are working smarter. I think that they're a lot more in tune with trying to have a better work-life balance and what does that look like and how did they get there. And so, we have to sort of fill the gaps for them. I have
Yeah.
several different, I have IHG hotels, Hilton hotels, and Marriott hotels. So
Yeah.
if I can learn something and take it off your plate or make it a 5-minute learning versus a 30-minute learning, then I'm adding value, right? So I
Yeah.
think that GMs are smarter about things like that now, and they want that level of support. Overall, I think servant leadership is still servant leadership, though. So I think the core people, and it's funny, I talk to a lot of people as I'm, kind of traveling throughout, that said, "Oh, I'm going to leave hospitality," and yeah, they left for a little while, but they've come back.
Yeah.
So I think people are doing it a little differently, perhaps, and I think they're trying to do it in a way that resonates with them better.
Yeah.
And it's not a perfect science, but I think we're getting better.
No, totally. It's interesting because I like asking that question to people because I think, again, it's one of those ones that's like, people, I think people are kind of like, like say last year was probably the first full year back for a lot of people in terms of like, okay, we're not only our hotels kind of getting to kind of more capacity, but also like conferences were back where you could learn from your peers more and be like, am I alone in noticing this like drastic
Yeah.
change in like personality and the personnel that we hire? And to your point, I feel like hospitality is a calling. I feel like the people, from what I hear, especially from leadership like yourself, like you were a GM, like you came up the ranks for GM, you went back to being an AGM, you were saying, and now you're like an RDO. And it's interesting in the sense that like, GameSpot's game, as they say, and it's like you can tell, like the passion because people are back. You know what I mean? It doesn't quite leave you. Like, yeah, you can go to an Amazon fulfillment center, you can get a sales job in a tech company, but like, is it as fulfilling when you've already got the fire burning inside you for hospitality, which is great because I think that boomerang has kind of happened and it's come back around now, where obviously we're at pre-COVID levels in terms of employment in the hospitality industry now, which is like a blessing. It took us just about 4 years to get there, but like we're back and it was insanely tough for everyone involved. But I always like asking people the question about like what's kind of changed. And I prefer like the personality types of things that have changed when I ask my questions, as opposed to like, oh wow, you got like keyless doors now. Like I honestly, I'm like, people kind of, whatever, you know what I mean? Or like, it's like, that's fine. But like, it's more like what has happened to the person. Like, like obviously I hear from people constantly about the challenges of hiring and the challenges of getting good frontline staff, and especially in hotels. Like whatever about restaurants, like somebody was saying to me, like, finding a housekeeper who'll stay, whatever the phrase, what do you call housekeeping staff now? What's
we call them room attendants.
Room attendants. Yeah. I feel like I'm using all these gendered and ancient phrases. Like, and I'm like, okay, I need to be careful when I say this podcast. Okay. So room attendants, but like somebody said to me, it's like, like that person has 20 rooms to fix. Like that's backbreaking as well. You know what I mean? Like it's a lot to like fix in a morning. You know what I mean? And it's like that person, there's just kind of like less of those people now, you know what I mean? And it's like when you think about like the challenges for hiring, I mean, if there are challenges, I mean, if you don't, I'd also love to hear that. But when you think about like, say, the running of the hotels themselves and the staff, like what do you think has kind of changed in like the staff's perspective and the way you hire for those kinds of staff since COVID, for example?
Well, I'll tell you a couple of things, and I'm, one of my best friends in this company is our talent acquisition leader, and I love her. I truly came to this company because I fell in love with her as a friend as much as anything else. She's amazing, and
give you say her name, give her a shout out.
Yeah, of course. Her name is Caridad, and she's wonderful. But we talk quite a bit about recruiting. I love to learn from her and listen to her because that's what she does, full time. One of the things that we talk a lot about is that if you think about hospitality 4 years ago, we would list our positions and we would say these are the hours we want people to work, and we want full time, and we'll take a little part time if we need to. I really think that it's great that the business is sort of turned upside down on its end. So now, if you have a great part-time person, let's say, for example, in one of my hotels over in Rock Hill, South Carolina, I have a lady that works with us at our front desk, and she does corporate recruiting for customer service work full-time for a living. She wanted a little part-time evening job. She was looking for some travel benefits. She's amazing. You like could not ask
Yeah.
for a better person. So I think we're taking folks where they are. I think we're a whole lot more, one of the things we do much better now is we do like video interviews. I've
Yeah.
actually hired the last two GMs. 4 years ago, if you'd said I'm going to hire a GM and never meet them in person, I would have felt completely just like that. There's no way. But I hired my last two GMs over a video. So we're meeting people where they are. I think we're also better at taking people's life circumstances into consideration. So if I've got somebody
Yeah.
great that wants to work 2 nights a week and just wants to fill a gap, then why would I not look at that person? I think we're much more competitive in our business these days. So, if you get a great candidate, you need to be calling that great candidate back, immediately.
Yeah.
I can remember in the days when we said, oh, you have to come to the front desk and you have to shake our hand and you have to do all this stuff. It's not like that anymore. But that's good. Competition for the people resource, that's good that we're challenging ourselves. So I think it's all positive. I just think
Yeah.
we're really having to force ourselves to be a whole lot more nimble.
Yeah.
And we better be appreciating folks and meeting them where they are a whole lot differently.
I mean, that's a lovely sentiment. And it sounds like you are. With somebody like you, Anita, it sounds like they're very lucky to have you. I'll say that. I love it. For anybody listening, I was like, yeah, we stick our tongue out to that. it's like, oh, the podcast. But okay, the last question I always ask people, when they're on the pod is, open-ended, vague question. It's gonna
awesome.
it's gonna totally throw you. For
Okay.
the people listening, what advice would you give them?
Gosh, I would say, generally speaking, that hospitality is a great living. I was talking to somebody this morning and we talked about the fact that we're still a little bit a business of second chances and one-offs and the odd duck, which I love. I think that, I think it's a great, great, great way to connect with people. I think it's important that if you get into hospitality, you understand what you're getting into. I just did a job fair at the local university here at University of Tennessee last week. And each one of those young, talented people, I stopped and paused and said, okay, do you know what you're getting into? Do you really understand? It's 365, 24/7 when you do what I do for a living. So it's, hotels are open all year. You have to be prepared for that. But man, what a great way to make a living. And what if you love people to your core, what a great opportunity to surround yourself with some really amazing folks, to learn, to grow, to do well. This is also a business where, it's great if you have, and I really encourage our young people and to get secondary education, but we're also a business of folks and built on the backs of folks that really just started out with strong work ethic and a love for people. So I think we're great. I think hospitality is great. I think that it's a blessing to do what I do for a living. So I would encourage folks to find your passion, and if hospitality is it, find some friends and learn it and learn how to do it to the best of your ability. We're all unique, right? So what we bring to the table is super important as individuals. You're right. This for me is a calling. This is where I'm supposed to be.
That's awesome. Well, Anita, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Happy to be here.